Matt Lenihan for Boxing Social in association with Empire Fight Store, our Kings. We have got Dan Rafael back on the screens. Dan, I apologise if I look not 100%, but I'm still tired. I've done a lot of travelling this year, my friend, and I was promising myself I'm not doing any interviews this week, but I was like, you know what, I need to get a couple in and we need to have a catch up. So before we start and talk all things boxing, how are you, my friend?
I'm a little less bedraggled than you are from all the travel. I put it like that.
Oh God. Plenty to sort of digest, but before we start talking about maybe the cards that were on last weekend, I want to talk about sort of the more confirmed news as of I think it was earlier on today. I'd seen ESPN report Manny Pacquiao and Barrios potentially for July 19th from their understanding for the WBC title. Now, what do you make of this? Manny Pacquiao has been retired for 4 years. He's been in an exhibition since, not looked the greatest in that as well. And for him to come back and fight for a title, I thought you had to be ranked in the is it the top 10 to qualify for that, or is it WBC make an exception? What do you make around the stories circulating about this?
Well, listen, I mean, no offense to my old employer, ESPN, not at all a surprise. That's been sort of one of the things that's been in the conversations now for quite a while. It's been kind of quiet on the Pacquiao side. They don't want to talk about it, even though there's probably a framework in place for that. And the reason for that is because Pacquiao, who has held elective office in the Philippines, both earlier in his days as a member of their House of Representatives, then he also served a term in the Senate. He ran for president of the country, did not come close to winning, and the Senate term ended. Now he's in a campaign to win a Senate seat for a second time. That election is coming up next week, and so
Yeah.
they're not going to make any discussion or promises or scheduling of a boxing event while he's in the middle of a campaign. Now, if he wins, it'll be somewhat similar to in the past when he was able to carve out a certain time when they were in recess to
Mhm.
do a boxing event, to have time to train and then to fight and still make sure he could take care of his duties in the Senate. If he loses the election, then it won't matter because he won't have to worry about going to a Senate job. So that will come to a head most likely, later in May when the Senate election is over with. But by no by 100%, this is something that's in the pipeline. They do PBC and TGB have requested July 19th as a date with the Nevada Commission to do a what is listed on the agenda as a pay-per-view event at the T-Mobile Arena. That is earmarked probably for that fight without question. I've talked to the people at PBC. I've talked to the Barrios camp. I mean, that's the Pacquiao people don't want to talk about it, but they'll wink, wink at you about it. So that's what's probably going to happen. You ask about how Manny Pacquiao, after 4 years out of the ring and having announced a retirement, could come back and fight for the world title. It's very easy. When you're a legend, membership has its privileges.
Mhm.
So Manny Pacquiao is one of the most famous, most legendary fighters in the history of boxing. And so if he wants to come out of retirement, that is something that he's going to be privileged to do. Not everybody can do that, but Pacquiao they'll make an exception for. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just telling you the way it is. I mean, it's Manny Pacquiao. I
Mhm.
don't love the idea of him coming out of the 4 year retirement to fight. You mentioned that he had done an exhibition match. I watched that. Now, the Pacquiao people, I asked them about that. They were like, Manny didn't train a day for that exhibition, which frankly is kind of disrespectful to the people that may have paid to go to it, but that's a different matter.
Mhm.
But he looked, pretty bad. He wasn't even fighting a boxer. He was fighting a some other kickboxer or a
Yeah.
Muay Thai fighter. Whoever it was not a boxer by trade, and he got clipped with a lot of shots. He looked pretty bad. Um, if he didn't train, so be it. Obviously, if he's fighting for the world title against Mario Barrios, I would assume Manny Pacquiao will put in a real training camp to prepare himself. Um, Barrios is maybe not the number one welterweight in boxing. He does have the WBC title. He's a very competent, very good professional fighter.
Yeah.
He's been in the ring with a lot of good fighters. He is coming off of a draw in his last fight on the Mike Tyson Jake Paul event. But that's a different story when you're 46 years old like Manny is. You haven't fought a real fight in 4 years. You're coming off that loss, and more
Mhm.
more significantly, you've been in so many hellacious fights throughout your legendary career that I do worry about him coming back. It also drives me a little crazy. He's already been elected to the International Boxing Hall of Fame. He got elected. The ballots were done at the end of last year. He's going
Mhm.
to be inducted in mid June, so he would actually be inducted and then fight just a
Yeah.
few weeks after his induction. Like I could see him standing at the podium, thanking everybody for his this wonderful honor to be elected and inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame, and then saying, "Oh, by the way, buy my pay-per-view coming up, in a few weeks." That's one of the reasons why, although I have nothing but love for my friends at the Boxing Hall of Fame, I love the Hall of Fame. I've been there numerous times. I grew up not that far from the Hall of Fame. It's a wonderful place to visit, especially on the induction weekend. But it bothered me when they changed the election threshold from a 5-year waiting period for the fighters to a 3-year waiting period, because this is exactly what I expected, that there would be several greats that would be elected or even on the ballot who would fight after that fact. Manny Pacquiao will be one of those who will do it. Granted, it's more than 3 years since he retired, but it's within the 5-year period. There have been others who have been elected and inducted who then came back and fought. He'll be the answer to one of those trivia questions. It's fighters like Sugar Ray Leonard elected and then later came back and fought Hector Camacho. Alexis Arguello had one more fight after he was inducted. You have Virgil Hill, the former cruiserweight and light heavyweight champion, Olympic medal winner. He did it. And then this is the great one that nobody ever gets when they ask the trivia question. It was Jeff Fennick and Zuma Nelson who fought 2 memorable fights. They both came out of retirement after being elected to the Hall of Fame and fought each other in their 3rd fight. And Pacquiao is going to join that group of illustrious other great fighters that have done the same.
Is this kind of a scenario where if Manny Pacquiao manages to come back out of retirement and pull this off and look good doing it, it sort of adds to his legacy? But if he comes back and looks, and look, you can forgive him, I think, for not looking his old self, at 46 and this long out the ring. Where does it hinder his legacy at all, or will people just see this as what it is and kind of move on quickly from it?
Yeah, I don't think it really has any impact on his legacy at all. I mean, if he wins, will it add to it? Yeah, of course it will add a little bit, because at 46, to go in the ring after a 4-year layoff and win a bona fide world title against a quality opponent, it certainly will add to it. But I mean, he already has one of the deepest, richest legacies in the history of the sport, with all the titles and all the money and the big events and the massive amount of tremendous fighters he has faced and defeated. So I don't know if it's going to increase it that much. And if he loses, I'll ask you this: does the fact that Ray Leonard lost after he retired to Camacho, does that in any way damage his legacy? Does the fact that a lot of fighters that fought way beyond when they were at their best and fought and came back out of retirement, like a Larry Holmes or a Evander Holyfield? I mean, there's plenty of guys that have done that through the years. Like Jeff Fennick and Zuma Nelson, who came out to fight each other. It didn't hinder their legacy. Nobody even really remembers or knows that they fought the 3rd time. So if he does come back and lose, I don't think that hurts his legacy whatsoever. I think people understand he's 46. He hasn't fought for 4 years. And if he loses to Mario Barrios in July or whenever this year, does that in any way, shape, or form take away the fact that he won 8 world titles, that he knocked out great fighters, that he beat Hall of Famers like Miguel Cotto and Ricky Hatton and Eric Morales and Marco Antonio Barrera and Juan Manuel Marquez, and I could go on, Oscar De La Hoya, etc. It doesn't change any of that.
Could you see a scenario where if he gets the title, we see someone else coming out of retirement, Floyd Mayweather, and saying, "Let's do that"? That in this strange world of boxing. Can you imagine that scenario? We see
I can imagine.
Maypac 2 at 46-year-old and 50.
First of all, don't give them any ideas, number one. Number two, he would have a big hill to climb just to win the title in the first place. But if he did get the title, I mean, you say, is it possible? Look, it's boxing. I never say never. I mean, I would find that to be somewhat unlikely. But again, you never say never. To me, if he does win the title in this fight, if it does take place, I got to admit, if he does it and it's a routine type of victory, I'd be a little shocked if he actually went back into retirement. I would imagine he would defend it or at least have one more fight, because he'd have the opportunity off of that kind of win to make another big payday. Manny always needs money.
Yeah, there was talks as well, I think, before this fight of Conor Benn at one point. Now, Conor's obviously got this rematch with Chris Eubank in September, we believe, providing they both want to do it and contract obligations. But he's maintained he wants to come back down and fight at 147 at some point. Whether he does that or not, I don't know. And he was looking at the Barrios fight at some point. But we see that as a scenario. I think they faced off in Saudi Arabia, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So that would be a huge fight.
Yeah, no, Manny and his team went there and met with Turki Al-Sheikh and tried to sell them on the Conor Benn fight. It ended up not happening. But yeah, I can see that as a possibility. That seems more logical and maybe likely, let's say, than if he were to win, than him doing another fight with Floyd. I don't think the world is going to wait for that. No. The thing about it is, though, Conor Benn, when he talks about returning to the welterweight division, he mentioned Mario Barrios by name. I mean, certainly he'd love to win any world title, but he's always been very specific that he wanted to win the WBC title because that was the title that his father had won, and that was something that was important to him to win a WBC world title. So, crazy stuff happens. I'll say this: if Manny Pacquiao was coming off of a victory against Mario Barrios and had regained, won the WBC title, certainly him against Conor Benn off of that type of win, that would make it a big deal, obviously.
Yeah, 100%.
And maybe at that point, Turkey will want to buy the fight, and maybe they do put that in a place like Saudi Arabia. Maybe they try to do it in the UK and bring Manny to the UK to do a fight. He's never fought in that country before, so you never say never. But you're getting way ahead of yourself because we still got to see if the Barrios fight 100% happens. It's probably going to happen, but I don't think you can say 100%. And he still has to deal with the election and still has to finalize everything. But it's possible. One thing I'll tell you, by the way, and I've said this before, if this event takes place in July, I am told 100% there's a very, very strong likelihood, probability, in fact, that the co-feature would be the rematch between Tim Tszyu and Sebastian Fundora for the WBC title at 154 pounds.
So I've heard rumors that fight will happen, but for that to be a co-main, that is an incredible co-main.
Yeah, that definitely beeps off the show. Remember when they fought for the first time last year, that was the main event of a pay-per-view. Now, granted, it took place on short notice because originally Tim was supposed to have a fight with Keith Thurman, and it was like 10, 12 days before the fight. Keith had the biceps injury. Mm-hmm. He was out. He had surgery. And what they did was and they got Tim and Sebastian Fundora to agree. Fundora was on that undercard originally, so he was trained and in shape and ready to go. And they were able to redo the main event, and Sebastian moved up from the undercard and fought in the main event. They put on a great fight. It was a crazy bloodbath because of the accidental foul and the nose injury. So both of them were bleeding, but they turned in a very exciting and dramatic fight. And now they're going to do a rematch. And it's going to, instead of, again, if this fight happens with Pacquiao, what I'm told, it'll be one of the undercard fights, probably the co-feature.
It's just, what a card that'll be, depending on what else you put with it as well. That could be an incredible card. I think that's the same weekend as Usyk Dubois and also Bam Rodriguez. Is that all in the same night? Or have I got my dates?
Well, you're talking about July 19th, I think. I don't remember off the top of my head, I'm looking on my calendar. I've got it right here. Yeah. But that could make it a busy weekend if you're accurate about that.
July 19th is Usyk Dubois.
If that's the case, that would actually be a little disappointing to me because boxing fans deserve to be able to focus on the big fights one at a time. And obviously Dubois and Usyk is a huge fight, and it's bigger than anything with Manny Pacquiao, but it's still, both of them are big enough where they deserve to have the spotlight on them for, that week.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sure when I was getting told this originally, I thought that they were going to do the week after, not July 19th.
And it is also, as you mentioned, that's the same day as Bam Rodriguez and Cafu in the unification, and Pacheco Macumbi in that co-feature. So that's unfortunate if it does come together like that. Yeah,
disappointing. But I suppose it's food for thought and a lot of boxing to consume over one weekend. Look, let's sort of pivot from that. Let's just reflect just a little bit on this Times Square card. There's a lot of interesting sort of narratives that have come from it. I want to touch on the Ryan Garcia performance against Rolly Romero. I thought from what I could see of the fight, it was quite a disciplined performance from Romero. Sort of picked his shots, caught Garcia well, dropped him, and then after that, Garcia obviously tentative throughout. Tim Bradley's comments on this, by the way, were wild, suggesting Ryan should retire after that performance. I've seen a lot of other comments as well on Ryan. What did you make of it from your vantage point watching the fight? What in terms of Ryan Garcia? This isn't the Ryan Garcia we saw previously. He's been through a lot. We know this. Mentally, he's completely different in a different place than he was 12 months ago. But what was your overall take home from that?
Well, fight? My first thought was he's obviously not using PEDs for this fight. That's how bad he looked. Yeah. Number two, he sleepwalked through the fight. I mean, Rolly did what Rolly does. I mean, he does have power, and he did catch him with a nice, double left hook there in round 2 and knocked him down. But Ryan Garcia allowed Rolly Romero, who in my opinion is a very one-dimensional fighter, but just allowed him to fight at the same comfortable pace the entire fight. So Rolly never had to change up, never had to do anything, was never forced out of his comfort zone. So if your opponent's going to allow you to just fight exactly the way you want for 12 rounds, Rolly did that and took advantage and won most of those rounds. It was a terrible, terrible fight. Ryan didn't really seem too hurt from the knockdown. I don't know if you can make that as an excuse for the performance the rest of the fight, because we've seen plenty of guys, get knocked down early without being a hard knockdown and get up and, get back in business, get their stuff together and go on and fight very well. So, Ryan did say at his post-fight news conference that he didn't feel right the whole time. His trainer, Derek James, was certainly telling him the right stuff in the corner. He certainly didn't lay the blame over anything about what occurred in terms of his trainer. He just did not have a good performance. I mean, I don't know why, but he just looked absolutely terrible. Maybe, there was the long layoff. He's lived a hard life. He has, admitted this. It's pretty obvious what had taken place with the amount of alcohol and drugs he had used and drank, the mental health issues he's dealt with. He was obviously suspended for a year. The last fight he was on PEDs. Whether you accept that he was doing it by accident or on purpose, that doesn't change the fact that a PED was in his system. And he just looked awful. And Rolly, again, was able to do exactly what he wanted to do for the entire fight and never forced the change. He never landed, Ryan, his left hook that was the A left hook. He landed a couple of them, but when he lands the big one, the A+ one, even the A level one, it's going to change the fight. He was never able to find that particular punch, and he sleepwalked through the fight, and it was terrible. And I felt bad for anybody that actually had, like myself, suffered through those 12 rounds.
I want to talk on a positive note. Teofimo Lopez, he did turn up against a guy who he can make you look bad in a sense, I think, Barbosa. He's coming off a very good victory for him against Jack Catterall, who, many people have been saying Jack was waiting for his world title opportunity, but he went and got that from Jack. But then Teo turned up and did what Teo should be doing in his eyes. But were you impressed with Teo, his performance?
I thought that was the best he's boxed since he fought the fight when he won the title at 140 against Josh Taylor. The fights that came after that, before this one, were very unimpressive. He got the wins, but they were not particularly impressive. So he wins like a very lopsided decision, for example, against Steve Claggett. Not a great performance, though. Then he got the decision against Jermaine Ortiz. Miserable, terrible fight. I thought Ortiz won that fight. Teofimo looked very bad in that fight. And then this fight obviously was much better against a Barbosa, who came in with a great record, as you mentioned, come off a really good win on the road against Catterall. Prior to that, he had looked very solid and taken apart Jose Ramirez in a decision win, who was on the same card in the Haney fight. Mm-hmm. But Barbosa talked so much shit about Teofimo in the buildup, and he just did nothing. He didn't deliver. He didn't have a spring in his step. He didn't throw a lot of punches. It was an abysmal performance, absolutely terrible. And Teofimo would box circles around him, won very easily. One thing about Teofimo is, as sharp as he looked in terms of his boxing, and he is a good boxer when he, is in the great condition he was in, that since he's gone up to 140 pounds, other than getting a knockout in his debut in the weight class against a journeyman kind of opponent in Pedro Campa, the power is a rumor. He has not shown any punching power. He's not come close to getting knockdowns and knockouts against these opponents. So the punching power that he displayed in some of the fights as a lightweight, particularly when, say, for example, he won his first title against Richard Comey, who he iced basically with one punch early in that fight, second round, if I remember correctly. The power is not translated in terms of moving up to the 140-pound weight class. Doesn't mean he can't still win against other good fighters, but in the power department, I just don't think it's there anymore.
He's been talking about fighting even higher as well in the weight classes, in the likes of a Jerome Boots Ennis and these kind of fights. When you hear that, obviously he's talking confident, and look, he fought well in his last fight. But do you realistically see that as a possibility, him to jump up? It'd be a big fight, two good names.
Well, I do think that's possible, because a fight between Teofimo Lopez and Jerome Boots Ennis is a fight that Turki Al-Sheikh has talked about wanting to have. If you go back before Ryan Garcia suffered the loss, because we're still not sure if that fight will happen with the rematch with Haney, one of the things that Turki had talked about was doing the Haney-Garcia rematch in Riyadh and taking a fight like Teofimo Lopez and Jerome Ennis and also putting it on that same show, because he likes to put up, big loaded cards. So I do think it's possible. Teofimo is now affiliated with Turki. Obviously, Boots Ennis is with Matchroom Boxing. They've been working on a lot of events with Turki also. Yeah. So that would certainly be a big fight. Now, all respect to Teofimo, he's a very good boxer. He's a very good fighter. Obviously, he's the world champion at 140. Moving up to fight a guy like Boots Ennis when you haven't really shined that much at 140, I think that's a heavy lift in terms of if you can actually beat Devin Haney. Boots Ennis rather. That's a tough fight. The other thing about that, by the way, is that they'll have to figure out, the mandatory situation, but I'm pretty sure they can address that because Boots does have a mandatory, unfortunately. We'll see. But one thing about Teofimo, I give him props because he's looking to fight the best guys. When he has gotten the opportunity against the biggest names, this is what's so maddening about him sometimes. He shows up like he showed up against Lomachenko. He showed
Yeah,
up against Josh Taylor. Then you put him in with the Jermaine Ortiz, and he looks really pedestrian. And that type of performance, he's very inconsistent. The Cambosis fight's another example. Granted, he had some physical ailments going into that fight, but even still, so you never know which Teofimo is going to show up.
I agree because I think when I saw him live in the flesh against Josh Taylor, and I had a friend there as well, and they were saying he says this guy is he's brilliant to watch. And I said no, he is when he's in full flow, he and he's on it, he is. But like you said, he almost looks laboured sometimes, like when it's not a big fight, like that it is like going to work. Whereas when he
That
has these things, it's like time to shine.
that was one of the reasons why I was even a little more impressed than I would have been, is the way he did against Barbosa, because no knock on Barbosa, but that was not a quote unquote big fight, right? That was
Mm-hmm.
a regular defense against a good opponent, fine, but it wasn't even the main event. And he still showed up and he still boxed really well in that fight. I didn't find it to be dynamic, and Barbosa looked like a corpse in there. So, Teofimo could pretty much do whatever he wanted to do, but that's not Teofimo's fault that the other guy didn't show up. He went
Mm-hmm.
out there and he did what he had to do. He probably won, virtually every round of the fight.
Just quickly, last two things. We've only got 10 minutes left. Do you want to see Haney Garcia rematch, or has that lost its legs?
No, I couldn't care less about that fight right now. The first fight was not a very good fight, despite the knockdowns. They both looked absolutely horrible in their fights that they just had, and Ryan lost the fight. So I'm not saying you can never do the rematch again, but I don't think that should be forced on the fans as a pay-per-view after those shit performances. Let them go do their own thing, maybe get a win or two here or there, and let's talk about it next year.
Yeah. Um, Naoya Inoue, and we were treated to a really good main event, I have to say. And Cardenas showed up, and look, it wasn't even a flash knockdown. That the shot that caught Inoue, it was just a brilliant left hook, I believe, that took him down. What did you make of the main event? And by the way, before that as well, Rafael Espinoza in the featherweight division, he looks absolutely brilliant.
Well,
Seems to have everything. But look, just talk about them two fights just quickly because it was brilliant.
Well, those two fights saved an otherwise horrible weekend, because we just discussed the terribleness of the fights in New York, including the Haney fight and Garcia. Tifimo, okay, but again, the other guy didn't show up. And then the William Skull
Yeah,
fight in quote marks against Canelo was absolute horseshit. That was garbage personified. So when we got to Sunday, you're begging for even something halfway decent, and thankfully, all four guys, winners and losers, delivered, because Espinoza, as you mentioned, he's always exciting. He's a man of the people. He went out there and he put on a great performance. His opponent, Edward Vasquez, who had given Joe Cordina, by the way, a very tough
he
fight in
did.
a title fight, loss at 130. Now he's back at 126. Heart of a lion, came to fight, just was outgunned by the bigger, stronger guy. Bigger when I say much taller. And that was a very fun fight to watch, despite being one-sided. And in the main event, how could you not want to see Ramon Cardenas again? The guy had his Rocky moment. He scored the knockdown against one of the great fighters in boxing, one of the all-time greats, and he
Mm-hmm.
looked, pretty good. He just didn't have the talent in a way had. And in a way, look, he brushed himself off like he did against Luis Nery. He got off the deck. He came back fighting hard, and he just had more talent. But that left hand, he's very susceptible to that, obviously, because it's a similar kind of shot, although from the other side, because Nery's a southpaw. That took him down in their sight. But the thing about it is this: the guys that lost the fights, you want to see them again. They elevated their careers and losses,
Yeah.
and you also, of course, want to see Inoue and Espinoza, because they look obviously what they did in their main event, in their A sides, let's say, of those two title fights.
Yeah, definitely. Everyone's stock went up, just because of the performances, win,
And
lose,
also,
draw.
Matt, I'll tell you this: they were not pay-per-view fights. Nobody asked $60 per card for the way that was done for New York or for Canelo, or even 90, at least in America anyway, if you wanted to get both of them.
Yeah,
I actually, as I wrote in a piece I wrote, people can read my thoughts more extensively about these cards from the weekend. I feel sorry for Turkey. The guy spent literally many tens of millions of dollars on the Canelo event and the Times Square event, and got nothing for his money.
hmm yeah. I'm going to say a lot of people coming away saying a lot of money spent and performances sadly did not live up, but we hope that will change. Dan, look, I appreciate you jumping on. We've not much time left on this Zoom, but just also as well in the description, of this interview will be the link to Dan's newsletter. Make sure you subscribe. As always, it'll be in the link on the stories as well on Boxing Social. Make sure you like, subscribe, and get involved with all things on that as well, because there's a lot of exciting stuff in that, and you can catch up on all the latest news live and direct. And we will catch up soon. There's a lot of big fights coming up: Hitchinson, Cambosos, and loads of fights in the States, and we'll catch up in person soon. So I appreciate it.
You bet, Matt. Thank you, sir.
Cheers, Dan.